Welcome to the top 10 dirty tricks and cheats of chess. Only the lowest of the low lives would actually use these, so don't try them at home. Go out into the real world and use them there instead. Mind you don't get caught, as like the kid that tried to hustle a chess robot, you might end up having your fingers broken. Modern technology has advanced far enough that machines can beat humans at chess with ease. For example, here is a chess engine running in my web browser, and imagine I'm playing as white, my opponent is playing as black. All you need to do is give it the move that it suggests, and you enter your opponent's move when it's his turn, and you continue just to follow as the computer thinks, and you're inevitably and inexorably going to win the game. And now, for example, if my opponent plays some weird move, you can see that the engine in the top corner here is saying I've got a +1 pawn advantage. If it goes negative, it means black has the advantage. It also gives you a nice visual of the line it's thinking of, and you just continue to follow as it instructs. And again, my player does a crazy move. It thinks that castling is good here, and as you go on, you'll see that your advantage will just increase until you win. So a chess engine is super useful with analysing games, but sadly it has also made it easier to cheat. Like, you can imagine I'm online playing a game on my phone, just entering the moves like this, and I'm just going to win. There have been many such cases of chess engines being in use over the last 10 years or so, ranging from cheating online, nipping off to the toilets to check your hidden phone, and even members of a French Olympiad team who had a system where someone watching at home would text the coach the best move, then the coach would go and stand or sit at different tables in the arena in order to signal the players at the board. Along with these dirty tricks, accusations of engine cheating have been on the increase too. For example, Christian Bauer once accused Anna Rudolph of hiding an engine in her lip balm, although there was no evidence of this. And more recently, Hans Niemann, who has actually admitted to engine cheating online in the past, was accused of cheating over the board by world champion Magnus Carlsen. In response to the accusation, Niemann suggested playing naked, and the internet being what it is, it was soon rife with speculation about wireless devices being hidden where the sun don't shine. Allegedly, the reason that Carlsen was able to detect Niemann's cheating was that Niemann's personal equipment was interfering with Carlsen's own back-end device. Dirty tricks indeed. Now, this one actually happened to me in a real tournament. Everybody on all the other tables had people to play against, but my opponent hadn't arrived. Everybody started their clocks, including me, and I sat there waiting. After a while, an arbiter came over and told me to give it another 15 minutes and I could claim victory. So, in my mind, I started to believe that I had this game sewn up and it would be an easy free tournament point for me. I was counting my points before they had hatched. But then, of course, 10 minutes later, the gentleman arrived, apologised for being late, in a Russian accent no less, and sat down and started the game. And this put my mind into a great deal of disarray. I proceeded to play very badly and ended up in a losing position with a piece down. However, I had one cheap trick left, which was to offer a draw. And to my surprise, he accepted. There have been a few somewhat higher profile incidences of players arriving late. Recently, Magnus Carlsen again. He arrived at a blitz game with only 30 seconds remaining, but went on to win it. Here's a clip of him arriving, and you can see Grandmaster Kovalev here thinking, God damn it! Another famous incident was Bobby Fischer arriving late for the first game of the 1972 World Championship match against Spassky. Talking of which, at number 8, Bobby Fischer. There he is. Fishing. He got up to all sorts of nonsense before, during and after the 1972 World Chess Championship match against Boris Spassky. He complained about the prize money being too low. He didn't show up to the initial press conference, risking the match being cancelled. He was late to the first game, as mentioned, although he did blunder and lost that one. He complained about the audience being too close to the players. He complained about the TV cameras and demanded they be removed. And then he didn't show up at all to the second game and forfeited it. After that, he insisted on playing in a backstage room for the third game, and Spassky agreed, probably out of exasperation and frustration, and this was probably a psychological mistake from him, as from this point Fischer turned the tables, managed to get the upper hand, and went on to become the world champion. And from that point he made escalating unreasonable demands for the next world championship match, until everyone was tired of him and they went ahead with other players instead, which means that Fischer went down as the undefeated world champion. What a knobhead, but do kind of like him. Lastly, to really release your inner Bobby Fischer intimidation factor, make sure that when you move a piece, you slam it down like you're starting a fight.
I'm right here.
And make sure you savor the moment when you break your opponent's ego. Now, this is one of my favourite things to do with my real-life chess friends in friendly games. The idea is to distract your opponent with chatter in order to try to get them to make a mistake. You can throw in some jokes, maybe make some random observations about the position, or even just plain insults. The more outrageous, the better. It's usually more fun if your opponent can give as good as he gets, and it's entertaining for the audience as well. I've actually been trash-talked in a real tournament too. It was at a classical time control, and my opponent was a small kid, maybe 7 years old. After each move I made, he would pump his fist and whisper shout, "Yes!" He would also write notes on the back of his score sheet saying how well he was doing and how bad I was in my plain sight. This was all deeply irritating, but I'm pleased to say that I managed to get into a winning position, and when he realised that he was going to lose, he tried one more thing. He started offering draws. Of course, I was very happy to decline each and every one of them and eventually took the win. Now, as we all know, a certain country is most righteous and pure and not corrupt at all. However, maybe before around February 2022, it was the most corrupt nation in Europe. In fact, the problem was so bad it reached into their chess tournaments. For example, in 2005, FIDE, the International Chess Federation, refused to ratify results from some of their tournaments, saying that they did not meet ethical expectations. On investigation into the matter, one of these tournaments actually turned out to be completely fake. So basically, a bunch of players were out to get free ratings points and take some shortcuts to becoming titled. What a bunch of cheating scumbags. Collusion. This is referring to situations in which players will deliberately lose or draw for money or to help their friends or teammates in tournaments. So let's take a look at one of the oldest incidences of this. At the 5th American Chess Congress in 1880, a player named Preston Ware made the following statement. "I was walking with Mr. Grundy on Sunday. He remarked to me that he was poor and really needed the second prize, and it would not make any difference to me if I played easily in our next game so as to give him the second prize, and that he would be willing to give a consideration for it. I said, 'I suppose you mean for me to play for a draw?' He said, 'Yes,' and I agreed to it, and $20 was agreed on as the consideration. We agreed to play on very slowly until the other games were terminated and to move back and forth to prolong the game. At the adjournment, I evidently had the best of the game, and he said at our lunch that he would delay coming in until about 8 o'clock, but that I should start up his clock as he had plenty of time to spare. But instead, he came in soon after 7 o'clock, and when we began to play, I moved back and forth, as agreed. I observed that he was making desperate efforts to win, and finally did so, perpetrating an infamous fraud upon me." Wow, so Mr. Ware's ethics were highly dubious. He thought they were working together for a draw and he'd get paid for it, but Mr. Grundy outdid him with a dirty double cross and went for the win. Nicely done, Mr. Grundy. Nicely done, you scumbag. Sabotage. There have been plenty of dirty tricks around or to do with the board itself. I'm going to give you 3 examples of them. We've all heard of Roy Lopez. Well, he was a 16th century Spanish priest who wrote about a famous opening. Here is his favourite opening, ending in bishop to b5. As well as writing about this opening, he also recommended that you place your chessboard in such a way that the sun reflects off of it and into your opponent's eyes and distracts him. So, nice dirty trick involving sabotage from Roy Lopez. Second example, there have been a few incidences of players smoking to distract or to annoy their opponents. In 1927, a player called Lederer accused Emanuel Lasker of smoking foul cigars and blowing the smoke into his face. Lasker said, "If my cigars are terrible and I blow the smoke in my opponent's face, why did they never object at the time of my blowing? If my cigars were of inferior quality, they would destroy the subtle, inimitable fabric of my own game. Those who have seen me play will bear witness that it curves away from rather than toward my opponent." What a knob. Third example. A player called Alekine had a cat that he liked to bring to tournaments with him. He would put the cat onto the board before the games in order to bring him luck. The allegation is that he was hoping for his opponents to have an allergic reaction. The stare. The idea of this is to stare intently and aggressively at your opponent in order to put them off their moves, especially when they're running out of time. Mikhail Tal was infamous for it. Here he is staring at Benko. In order to counteract Tal's stares, Benko tried wearing some dark shades. It didn't work though, he lost. In the 1978 championship between Korchnoi and Karpov, which was full of craziness, Korchnoi wore mirrored sunglasses to avoid Karpov's stare. But it turned out that the stare doesn't have to come from your opponent in order to have an effect. Karpov brought with him a parapsychological hypnotist named Dr. Zukar, who sat in the audience and stared at Korchnoi during the games. Korchnoi complained about this, but he wasn't able to get him removed from the tournament. So he ended up getting 2 American members of an Indian religious sect to sit in the audience and stare back at Zukar in order to counteract him. Apparently, these sect members also happened to be out on bail awaiting their retrial for murder. So all sorts of sketchiness going on at the 1978 championship. The idea here, which is mostly utilised by underhand, immoral hustlers, is to make illegal moves in order to gain an advantage. If you are playing a fast game, it's likely that your opponent won't notice what just happened and will keep playing on. If they do notice, you just say sorry and then reset. One particular dirty trick is to place your piece on the line instead of directly on the square, so that it's effectively on 2 squares, and then on your next move with this piece you can treat it as either from this square or this square, depending on what's more advantageous to you. Here is a clip of an actual chess hustler doing an illegal move. He moves it through another piece as if the other piece were not there at all. Finally, scraping the bottom of the barrel, wait for your opponent to be extremely ill, at death's door even, and then play them. I've got 2 examples of this. The first is Adolf Anderssen against Paul Morphy. Morphy had come to Paris to play a match against Anderssen, but became ill with intestinal flu. And at the time, the treatment was to have leeches suck your blood. So there was Morphy, unable to stand by himself in his Parisian room, being leeched, but he still wanted to play. So they had a board brought up to his room, and Anderssen agreed to play him. Who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Adolf? At first, Morphy wasn't playing to his usual standards, but as the games progressed, he started recovering from the illness and turned the match around and finally won. So well done to him, and bad luck, Adolf. And a final example is Mr. Poput versus Labordnay in 1840. Labordnay was one of the all-time greats. I'm covering his 1834 World Championship match against McDonnell in other videos on this channel. But in 1838, 2 years before the game we're talking about, he suffered a stroke, and by 1840 he was suffering from dropsy and at death's door. But Mr. Poput wanted to play him anyway. Here is the game. Labordnay had the black pieces, and he gave Mr. Poput pawn odds by taking his own f-pawn off the board, and the game proceeded. I'm just going to zoom through this extremely quickly to get to the endpoint. The endpoint is here. And here, Labordnay was compelled to resign from exhaustion, and he went on to die only a couple of days later. So congratulations on your win, Mr. Poput. So that's it, ending on a cheery note. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.